In this video, I'm going to show you how you can transform a glass bowl into a lush bioactive terrarium, showing all the steps along the way to make sure it's set up aesthetically and for longevity. We'll start in the bottom of the bowl with a pile of lacquer. This is going to create a drainage layer at the bottom of the terrarium where excess water can leave the substrate, meaning it won't go damp or soggy over time. I like using lacquer as my drainage medium because it's cheap, lightweight and porous, which means it retains lots of water. Alternatively, you can use stones you find outside if you're on a budget. On top of this, I'm going to lay a window screen mesh, which will stop all the substrate from mixing into the drainage layer. If this happened, it would wick up water back into the soil and saturate it, making it less effective. I've run out of my big sheets of mesh here, so I'm just using multiple scraps, which should still work fine together. On top of the mesh, I'm adding an activated charcoal, which can absorb toxins and help prevent mold buildup, although this can be skipped if you can't find any to use. Straight on top of the charcoal, I'll add in a terrarium substrate, which is made up of a mix of 1 part cocoa coir, 1/4 part worm castings, 1 part sphagnum moss, 1/4 part activated charcoal, and 1 part akadama. The substrate could still be made without the sphagnum moss or charcoal and would still be fine, but these components have the highest chance of success when used together. I'm brushing the substrate in a gradient towards the back of the terrarium, and this is super important as it will stop the build from feeling flat and allow all of the plants and scaping to be viewed face on. It's now time to move on to the hardscape, and I'm trying out some different arrangements of driftwood here, trying to lay them out on each side of the bowl to stretch out into the middle. It's important when starting the hardscape you establish what sense of scale you want to use in the build. For this bowl, I want to imagine that the driftwood pieces are the size of trees, and that means I need to choose what I add carefully with that in mind. I'll take some more substrate and add it around the driftwood to help anchor it in place. I can also use a paintbrush to help move some of the substrate up towards the driftwood, creating a little dip snaking down the centre. You can see that I've made each mini tree smaller as it gets further back in the bowl, and this will help align with the perspective that a landscape of this size would have. A great way to further this perspective is with a path, as it gives the eye something to follow and it's easy to reduce in size. I'll start with large stones towards the front and slowly place them, getting smaller and smaller until they reach the back of the bowl. The main goal we're going for here is to create the illusion of a miniature world rather than just some plants in a jar, and this is what will set apart your terrariums from those you would find in a supermarket. As you can see, towards the back of the bowl, the stones are getting almost too small to see, giving the illusion that they're being lost in the distance. I'm now going to add in some extra pieces of spiderwood to fill in some of the empty space and act like roots or vines wrapping around the trees. The first plant to go into the bowl will be this Nephrolepis fern, which I unpotted and then removed the excess soil from around the roots. I can then remove some substrate from the right side of the bowl to make a small hole for the fern to fit into. I'll carefully slot the fern in, guiding the roots into the empty space and brushing the substrate back around it. You can now see me manipulating the leaves of the fern to guide them into the shape I want by hooking them around the driftwood and pulling them out so they're less compressed. To add in these baby spider plants, I'm going to use my long tweezers to pull the roots under the substrate, making sure they're covered up, and this will allow them to establish into the new environment. I'll add in this peperomia just behind the fern on the right side, brushing some extra substrate over the roots to hold it in place. I've taken a rootless cutting of this paulownia and I'll press the stem into the substrate where it will form new roots under the humid conditions. This is one of the best terrarium plants, and I have a 100% success rate of using cuttings of it like this. I tend to position these larger plant cuttings along the edges of the scape so that they don't block our view of the other plants down the middle. Doing this also creates the effect of the world continuing to expand behind the plants as you can't see the empty glass. In the empty space towards the front, I'll start covering the substrate with some different aquatic moss species which grow well in a humid terrarium. They will need some extra maintenance, however, to keep them moist to ensure for optimum growth. I'll now start to add in some smaller plant cuttings onto the moss and remaining empty substrate. It's good to include plants with tiny leaves to contrast your larger plants, as this will help shrink the scale of your terrarium. These should be positioned in the centre and towards the front where they're most visible. A lot of terrariums that I see nowadays, particularly those in supermarkets and garden centres, just place the large plants straight into the centre of the terrarium. While this may be convenient, I feel it fails to create any sense of scenery, and in smaller setups like this, it's key to have tiny plants that fit the scale of the build. In the same way we use smaller plants to blend in the larger ones, we can use smaller rocks to help blend in the larger rocks, and this will help them to appear less random and blend the scape into one. We can also use stones to fill in any empty gaps in the hardscape or plants, like between these roots on the left side of the build. This will help the whole thing to feel more complete. We can now spray down the whole build with deionized or distilled water or even rainwater. These options are better than tap water as they prevent the risk of adding unwanted impurities or minerals that are present in normal water. For example, the tap water where I live is very chalky, so using it would add unwanted calcium carbonate into the setup. You should also be careful not to overwater, as this is the most common way to kill a terrarium, and the substrate should be slightly moist and not damp or soggy. I always wipe down my glass afterwards to remove off any substrate stuck to the inside so I can better see my build and allow more light through the glass. I also do the same to the outside of the bowl. To complete the terrarium, we need to add in Springtails, which will eat any mold or decaying plants in the setup and in turn add nutrients back into the soil. This is especially important in a setup like this because wood is prone to grow mold super easily, so if you want to use wood in your builds, I would always advise adding in Springtails. The last step is to add on a lid to keep the humidity inside the build. A closed terrarium creates a natural water cycle where the water evaporates off the plant during evapotranspiration. This then collects on the glass and falls back down into the substrate. This is then in turn picked up by the roots and the cycle continues. Without the lid, the water will escape and this can't happen. I'm super happy with how this build turned out and I hope it can spark some inspiration for your own builds. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, and I'm going to try to keep releasing a new terrarium build every Tuesday, so stay tuned for next week.